Good morning. We're going to be doing a diagnostic on the floating head switch. We're going to be running through step by step. Let's talk about the first process. The floating head switch is located right here. This little tiny switch with a mechanical lever there. As we lift up on it, there's going to be an audible click. That audible click closes off the contacts between the top wire and a lower wire. Those two wires connect to the F port here. There's small voltage running through the line so that when the contact is closed, it then signals the breakout board inside of this system, which then gets transferred through this multi-pin port to Mach 3. And under Mach 3, we go to Diagnostic Alt 7, and we should see it when we lift off. Under Digitize, a small light will activate as we lift it off. That is a series of events that occurs in a floating head transaction, at least from a wiring perspective, which if we're going to experience any issues with this, that's where we'll see it. The first thing to check is to make sure that your electrical contacts here are stable, aren't bent, aren't crimped. During transit, while we do try to eliminate all of the variables, we have to make sure that we are getting solid contact here. The next thing we listen for is an audible click as we lift this off. There's going to be a small audible click. If there's no audible click, what we do is we unscrew here, here, and here. But we start off with these two to try to relieve any pressure that may have been added during travel. If not, we release 1, 2, 3, and we actually pull that piece off of the table, off of this head, and we physically check that switch for a manual click. If there is no click, then that switch has been damaged, in which case we will have to go ahead and send out a replacement. Another thing that you can also do is relieve the pressure on the switch by unscrewing the screw here, and there's a screw on the bottom left hand side of that switch, and by relieving that pressure, if it does allow you to make that click again, go ahead and reseat that switch, reattach it, check for the click, and as long as you're getting the click and as long as we're getting that light up in Mach 3, you're fine. And just to reinforce, this switch, this piece of metal here is activating the switch. This metal can get caught and lifted above this bolt, and this is partially because we're trying to protect the switch and partially just inherent with the design. As this comes up, and if your torch continues to dive, this will keep you from slamming into and potentially damaging that switch even more. So just keep that in mind here. You should hear an audible click. If you're not hearing an audible click, one thing that is simple enough to do is to run a wire from this connection to the lower connection. This physically closes that circuit. If by physically closing the circuit you do get the digitized light on the screen, you're doing it right, and that means that the switch itself is not responding if you're able to jump that connection there and get a light up in the screen. If you're not seeing it there, then it's going to come down to the control box. Either it's going to be something here at the wire, whether it's crimped or damaged along the way, or if internally there is a small disconnect at the breakout board. And if that's the case, if we're seeing everything up to this point not reacting, then we're going to go ahead and take a look at inside of the control box and determine what and where the damage is. That being said, one thing we always recommend you doing is reseating and making sure that your serial port connection here connected to the computer down there is secure, because that will also prevent us from being able to make this connection in Digitize. That being said, you have all the information you're going to need to go ahead and get started on fixing your switch.